fair use to read books aloud on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, the other social platforms, live streams, and more? Let's talk to everybody's favorite IP and entertainment lawyer, Tony, to find out more.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that's dedicated to all things intellectual property.
We've been talking a lot on the channel about reading books in public, reading books on YouTube, putting videos up on social media. We've got a lot of really great discussion on it. And one of the questions we get inevitably on every single one of those videos is whether or not it is fair use to read a book aloud on YouTube or any of the other social platforms. So Tony, the legal side of this.
So I want to say it on the record. I think I've said it before in different videos, but if I had not even a dollar, if I had a penny every single time someone on social media said no copyright infringement intended, which you're literally admitting to copyright infringement, fair use applies, I would be a millionaire right now. I am not even kidding you. And I've seen it in too many ways, but fair use, this I definitely have said in previous videos. Obviously, check out the playlist. Fair use is easily one of the most used and abused terms in all of intellectual property law. And it's because I think people do not understand the concept of what fair use truly is. People think that fair use is just like a get out of jail free card kind of thing where, oh, here, that's it, end of story. Like, that's not how it operates. So first things first, fair use operates as a defense to copyright infringement, meaning that if you have been accused of copyright infringement by the copyright owner, then that's when you can say it's not infringement, it's fair use. But this is where it becomes a step 1 and a step 2 analysis for fair use. This is all laid out in 17 U.S.C. 107 in the Copyright Act of 1976. This is the fair use doctrine. And it says very clearly that that fair use is not an infringement to copyright so long as you are using someone else's copyrighted work for criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research. 6 permitted uses that you can use someone else's copyrighted work such that it does not trigger a copyright infringement claim. Now, I want to pause for a second because there are people that are going to say, oh, well, what about parody? What about satire? Those get lumped into the broader categories of a criticism or a commentary. But in all, those are the permitted reasons that you can use someone else's copyrighted work and not it qualifying as copyright infringement. But I cannot stress it enough. I do it all the time with my students. Every single semester I teach entertainment law. Every single semester I teach IP. I do it on my social media accounts. I've done it on these videos, and I will say it again in the same syntax, in the same tenor, in the same exact tone that I'm evoking with this. Copyright infringement, fair use operates as a defense to copyright infringement so long as you are using someone else's copyrighted work for criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research. If you are not using someone else's copyrighted work for criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research, to quote the great community chess card from the iconic Milton Bradley game Monopoly, or whoever makes it these days, the iconic Monopoly card game, there's that card that you can whip out and it says the fated words, do not pass go, do not collect $200. And I'm telling you right now, if you are using someone else's copyrighted work and it is not criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research, your fair use argument is total trash. There is no fair use argument, period. You are infringing copyright if you are not using someone else's copyrighted work for criticism, for commentary, for news reporting, for teaching, for scholarship, for research. Now, if you are using it for criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research, that's a mouthful, all you have to do now is then look at the 4-factor test that is laid out again in the Copyright Act of 1976 that looks at the purpose and character of the use, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount of substantiality of your use of the copyrighted work in proportion to the copyrighted work as a whole. And then lastly, you assess any market harm that original copyright owner has suffered as a result of your use of their copyrighted work. Now, I want to obviously indicate that you don't need to satisfy all 4 factors. One is enough. The Supreme Court has even made that very clear in the iconic Campbell versus Acuff Rose music case, where they found that in a fair use assessment, satisfying even one factor was enough to supersede all the other factors. So not one factor is dispositive of the other. However, I will say that every single fair use assessment is going to vary. It's not a cookie cutter model that is going to apply across the landscape with everything. So all fair use scenarios in the realm of book reading is going to be different on a case by case basis. So it's all going to be a matter of how fact specific the information is in a certain given scenario that could move be more relevant to one factor and potentially move the needle potentially in favor of fair use or against fair use. That's really the narrative here. And obviously, if you have any shred of a doubt related to fair use, you don't understand the concept of it, or you don't understand the analysis that goes into fair use, don't try to cheapen it. Don't try to guess yourself. Go to a lawyer that has experience in copyright law and especially in fair use assessments, because that is going to be paramount to understanding if any scenario that you're using someone else's copyrighted work in the book world would satisfy the fair use doctrine, generally speaking. But all that to say, that is an essential part of that analysis. So with the purpose and character of the use, that's where you go into what is the criticism? What is the commentary? Explain. How have you transformed that original work of authorship in such a way that you have almost made it a new copyright? What is the nature of the copyrighted work? How much of the material are you actually using? And will, the market harm thing, will the, again, I think it's fact specific, but inevitably, will the use of someone else's copyrighted work cause some type of undue harm to the original copyright owner such that it's going to weaken the argument for fair use? Those are so essential to the analysis. And like I say, you don't need to satisfy all four. One is enough. But certainly in an analysis overall, that will lead you to understand how strong or weak your fair use argument is. So I'm going to say right now, just applying it, plugging and playing that doctrine into a scenario of book reading on social media, there is never a world where fair use is going to work. You're reading an entire book from cover to cover. You're reading every single last word on every single page. You're even reading the titles, everything under the sun that's covered between those the binding of that book. That recitation, you're immediately negating factor number 3, the amount of substantiality of the use of the copyright work. You're reading the whole thing. You're not sampling it. You're not reading like one paragraph of a 300-page book. You're reading the entire 300-page book. So obviously that's a problem there. Also, there is nothing transformative about reading a book from cover to cover. What, you read it in a funny voice for different characters? Good for you. You've got acting skills, but that is not a satisfaction of the criticism or commentary prongs that are essential to that part of the analysis. That is not news reporting. That's not teaching, scholarship, or research. None of it is. That doesn't work. But moreover, I think the one that is abundantly important here is the market harm. Because again, you don't realize that you reading a book on social media is hurting the author, because yes, they're getting the publicity. Yes, their name is out there. Yes, their book is out there. But don't you realize that you reading in front of 50 people, 100 people, 500 people, thousands of people on TikTok Live, on Instagram Live, having that video live in perpetuity on YouTube, where it will get thousands and thousands of views? Do you not realize that that author is now not getting any royalties off of any sale of their books? Because now the people that are listening to that book don't have an incentive to go to the store and buy the book. They don't have an incentive to go to KDP or any other Kindle platform to buy the book digitally. They don't have any incentive to do that because they already listened to the book, and that's it. End of story. They won't even go to Audible to listen to the audiobook because they literally heard it on these social media channels. So all that to say, any way you slice or dice it, fair use does not function as a proper defense in any scenario related to book readings, whether that's done in live and living color or on social media. And I'm telling you right now, anybody that thinks fair use is going to be an operable means of doing this as their business sincerely needs to go to a copyright attorney to get that consultation. Because if you don't like seeing this face and hearing these words out of my mouth, at least hear it from someone else who can say, hey, you know what that guy said with the glasses and the blue sweater and blue shirt, he actually is right about it. So that's just my 2 cents on it. It's a ride or die argument that I will take to my grave, but that is essential. And I think it's super important for people to be not only informed about just how fair use doesn't apply in this scenario, but generally speaking, it's important for people to be informed on what fair use is even to begin with. I mean, it is so important for people to know what fair use is, because there is a very, very broad misconception of the whole doctrine, generally speaking. And like I said, it's the most used and abused term. And I think, unfortunately, laypersons have kind of created this new narrative of what fair use is.
And I already know we're going to get comments about, well, what if I don't read the entire book? What if I read 1 chapter or 5 chapters? Can I use fair use for just one of those chapters?
It does not matter. It really does not matter. You're still reading a fairly substantial amount of the copyrighted work. You really have to think to yourself, if I am reading, let's say, an abbreviated portion of the book, what have I done that is so transformative from the original work? What, the print version versus reading it aloud? Okay, fine. You're reading it aloud versus what someone else would ordinarily do, which is they read it to themselves when they're reading page to page. I even then, I don't see any viable argument to say that fair use would be great there. Where fair use would only function in a scenario like that is if, let's say, this is a far-reaching example, but entertain me for a moment. If let's say that you are, let's say that you have a YouTube channel where you analyze or you read, let's use something legal in nature. Let's say you have a legal talk show on YouTube. And you want to read books that have kind of like legal spins on them. And let's say you read like a few lines from something, but then you supplement it with commentary about, let's say, well, here in the state of New York, this is the rule on, criminal law related to manslaughter, or this is the penal code rule in California related to murder. And maybe they're, let's say, playing that narrative, they're connecting or bridging what happens in reality to the book. If you're providing like a creative take of criticism or commentary, that's where the fair use doctrine is appropriately being used. Obviously, that's a off the cuff kind of example, but what I'm basically saying is you're just mere recitation of the book, again, albeit small and short. That's not enough to say fair use is applied. That's where you have to supplement it with a little extra oomph that get that meat on the bones that says, hey, this actually is not only a fair use, this is a transformative fair use, and this is how this person transformed the original copyrighted work into something new. That's where fair use is going to be super essential and will be used appropriately. But to just say, oh, I just read a little chapter or a few chapters, that's fair use. That's no different than the boy crying wolf. It's just not going to work.
And you know what? I think that's a really good thing to point out. If you have had ideas sparked by the end of this conversation, where we talk specifically about how you could maybe make it a little transformative before you do it with your brilliant idea that you have just decided on, go talk to a lawyer, double check, make sure it truly is okay before you do it, because just because we have this great idea that we think is transformative and is going to work and going to protect us doesn't mean that it actually is. So I want you to have your ideas, think through how you could potentially be doing that if it's really something that speaks to you and draws you in, and then get yourself a lawyer and double check with that. If you need a lawyer, if you need contact information, I have people that I can send you, so feel free to reach out. We can get your questions answered. And if you've got questions on anything related to the legal side of publishing, now is the time to go ahead and drop those. Tony's coming back for upcoming episodes. And as always, you can reach out to Tony on his social media. Tony, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the IP Professor. You can check out my entertainment law podcast called Unseen. New episodes drop every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Drop your questions down below. Tony's coming back to keep us legally protected in the publishing space. And we're dropping videos daily to help you navigate the world of your publishing, from your writing to your publishing to your marketing, to make this your most easy and profitable year ever. We'll see you in the upcoming episodes.